I'm Andy Schmuckler. In the previous recording, just concluded, I don't know, maybe a half an hour ago, I brought up the question of why do we take pleasure in beauty uh, in the context of the evolutionary perspective in which we got to assume, pretty much assume, that if there's something that seems to be in our nature, in terms of our experiential tendencies, that it's there for a reason, that it got selected for because those ancestors who had that tendency um, were better able than those that did not to get their DNA into the future. And I think that when it comes to human beings taking pleasure in beauty, I think we can pretty safely assume that that is conclusive evidence that there is something that we gain in terms of our, what is the word that evolutionists use, like adaptability, adaptation, that it helps us to survive. It helped our ancestors to survive, to develop that tendency. So then we could start with the question, well, what do we mean by beauty? We can talk about beauty when it comes to, I look out the window at a forest and the beauty of the forest and the mountains beyond it. We can talk about beauty in terms of, the music of Bach and the way he put sound together that we, at least a substantial number of people over a couple of centuries have found beautiful. We can talk about Michelangelo's, what he made out of marble and how we find that beautiful. I think we can also talk about the catch that Willie Mays made in the 1954 World Series that I expected even people who are too young to have watched it live when the Giants played the Indians in the World Series. Probably have seen a picture of him sprinting out toward the center field wall and catching the ball over his shoulder and wheeling in one motion to get the ball back to the infield. I mean, that was a beautiful catch. So what all those things have in common? I think that what we can say is that they have in common that whatever it is, in whatever genre it is, it represents some kind of a ideal, some kind of things being in the way they should be, the notes being composed in a way that gives pleasure because somehow there's something about the way Bach put together the Brandenburg Concerto that conjures up a feeling in us that we think that's beautiful and it gives us pleasure. I've also noticed that over the last few years, talking about the force of fascism that's arisen in America, I've been using the word ugly, just crept in more and more, like it captured something there about how things are not supposed to be. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I ask a question, well, why would evolution have put this experiential tendency in us, which evidently it did, because it's cross-cultural. I mean, it's not just, Western civilization. I think we can find pretty globally throughout history and cross-culturally that people have taken pleasure in beauty. The way if people think gold is beautiful, the way it gleams, gold becomes valuable. Same with diamonds and other gems. They think they're beautiful. And the people who have dominated civilized societies, the kings and emperors and their retinues and the aristocrats have done what they could to surround themselves with beauty, uh, different concepts of beauty to an extent. You can see whether it's a Japanese garden or whether it's Versailles, that some human eye was striving for something that they would find beautiful according to their lights. And people don't all find exactly the same thing as beautiful. But I think that underneath all the individual and cultural differences, you can find vast areas of agreement about beauty. And we go to the British Museum, and you find that the objects they're displaying were probably considered beautiful in the ancient civilization they came from, and we consider them beautiful still. The Mask of Nefertiti, and I think they've done studies. I'm pretty sure they've done studies because I have a fairly clear recollection, if not the details, then the basic fact that people cross culturally have broad agreement about what faces are beautiful, whether they're people, whether they're Asian faces or European faces or African faces or Polynesian faces. There's broad agreement about the beauty of a human face. So why have we been shaped by the process of selection that shaped all the rest of us? You know, hearts that beat and nervous systems that function the way they function, and bones that hold us together, and all the molecular stuff that's been selected for. Why is it also this evolutionary process that created us, selected us to take pleasure in beauty? Well, another study talks about the beauty that plays a role in people's choosing a mate, that enhances our likelihood of getting our DNA into the future, to be attracted to beauty. And part of the beauty, people have talked about female beauty in terms of lustrous hair and certain fullness of lips or whatever, being indicative of good health and fertility. That doesn't necessarily mean they're reliable, but we find beautiful some signals apparently that tell us that this might be a good place to be attracted to, if the goal, as evolution has made it for everybody, not just humans, to get our DNA into the futures. But I think that that's important. But I don't think that that the role that beauty plays in our lives is just sort of derived from the erotic dimension. I'm not reductionist like the Freudians were, where it seems like the sexual root of things is considered to be the source of everything that flowers up from it and through sublimation. So that the idea that there's something erotic that is the reason why we find a beautiful marble statue or a great musical composition beautiful. I just don't buy that. I think it goes there. I think there's a way in which the beautiful and the erotically attractive overlap significantly. But it's the issue of attraction is just part of the picture, and in terms of being attracted to the beautiful, there's also that old song: "Do I love you because you're beautiful, or are you beautiful because I love you?" but that pleasure goes into the bonding where somebody can be with someone who's not necessarily Miss Universe material, but is beautiful in their eyes because of the love between them. So it is one of the components that's that's there. But I think we find um, pleasure in anything that sort of constitute the way things should be, things well ordered, things ideally put together, however you want to put it. Well, it's me that's trying to define beauty, and that's the best I've been able to come up with. Over the years, I've read what I could about people writing about beauty. George Santayana, a guy named, oh God, I'm going to forget the name. Anyway, uh, more modern people writing about it. I have never been hugely satisfied with what they have to say. But the subject has always interested me because beauty does seem to me to be a really big deal, and people are showing that it's a big deal to people all the time when they try to arrange their furniture nicely and they try to choose their colors and choose a paint for the wall um, and people choose cars based on the styling. We care about beauty. And I ask, so the question, why do we humans take pleasure in beauty? And the answer um, that I'd like to propose, and I don't feel so wedded to this that I put it as part of the core of what I call my better human story, which is making sense of the whole human picture of our species and what we've been through and what we are. That I feel like I can say, well, I'm convinced this is the way it is, or at least substantially the way it is. This is sort of more conjectural. But here's my conjecture. Uh, we're a species that differentiated ourselves from the rest of life on Earth back some hundreds of thousands of years ago, wherever you want to draw the line, where we were becoming, let's just say, increasingly cultural, meaning that more and more of how people were living their lives and conducting their societies um, was the product of their thinking and inventing and creating uh, answers to the various questions of how to look at things, what they mean, and what to do, how they should be done, all kinds of things that make up a culture. We're not the only creatures to have some culture, but when I look at the culture of the chimpanzees or any of the other creatures that seem to have some bit of culture, the magnitude of difference got to be really great over the course of, well, I don't know when you want to start, but there's tool making back several million years, uh, going beyond what other species did, and then eventually we get to more investment apparently in language and symbolic expressions, some of which, like paintings on the walls of caves, we're able to look at and think about, well, what was well, what did this mean that they did this? But there are a lot of things I'm sure that we don't know about the stories they told around the campfire and the customs that they created and all kinds of things that would come under the category of culture. So more and more culture is getting a voice about how human beings are going to live, um, which means that less and less is the inborn uh, tendency, the instinct, um, going to dictate the life. Not that it isn't still there in an important way, but that the proportions change in the direction of more culture, less determined by instinct. Well, when I think about that less determined by instinct, I think that might be a clue about this beauty thing, given the way I've defined what it is that we regard as beautiful, what's really nicely ordered. If everything is determined by instinct, that means that it's been essentially vetted by the process of natural selection. I mean, the instincts that a creature is born with are have emerged over, I mean, whatever the stretch of time is that some of our instinctual nature probably goes back a couple 100 million years, back when, you know, the flight business, for example, there's some stuff in us which is really, really old, and and then as evolution goes along, different creatures get different sets of instincts. Like rabbits don't behave the same as lions, and there's this branching, but still, it happens in the context of a natural order in which the interactions of all the pieces are sort of been selected to provide a degree of stability as the whole system advances into the future, even with things changing and not changing, but still, that's the tendency of natural selection is to choose what can, and when it chooses instincts to put into a species, and I don't mean to personify it because that's not what I mean, but as certain instincts get selected in the branching of the various species, there's a sense in which the creature's going to be naturally inclined to behave the way has ancestrally proved to be survival enhancing. In other words, it's going to be in the service of life in some way for creatures in their natural environment to be in which they evolved to behave in ways which help them to survive. But if a creature steps out of that order, to a meaningful degree, and that's what we have done, and what we've done sort of increasingly over the last hundreds of thousands, or maybe even a little bit millions of years. I don't know, how much culture, how soon, but that means that the degree of indeterminateness enters into the picture. The creature might go this way, or it might go that way, or it might go this way. There's a degree of choice. One of the things that I think is really intriguing about the book of Genesis is that the tree that God says to Adam and Eve that they must not eat of, they may eat of all the other trees, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the one tree that they're not allowed to eat of. And of course, Satan tempts Eve in the story. I mean, you blame it on the devil, you blame it on the woman, and then Adam eats what the woman offered, and all hell breaks loose. We lose paradise. But, there's a degree in which it's interesting that it's the knowledge of good and evil, meaning it corresponds, I'm not going to say meaning, what the composers of Genesis, what that signifies is an interesting question, but I won't presume to say that what I'm reading into it is what it means in the context of the first book of the Bible that gets handed down in the Judeo-Christian tradition. But I see it as corresponding with this thing about becoming more cultural and it becoming more and more possible that we will make bad choices. So in a sense that it's important for us to get a knowledge of uh, good and evil that other creatures didn't need, um, because instinct was sufficiently determinative that they were going to do what they were going to do, which was selected for over the eons. But when we become less determinative, we need to have some every way that we can find to be oriented toward doing what we should do. And we need some kind of a compass to find our direction when we have a choice of directions that the other species don't. And by the way, I don't think that the human sense of beauty is greatly embodied in other species. I don't, I've not really studied to find that out. I mean, I've read about bowerbirds and how they attract a mate by decorating the bower. And they seem to have an aesthetic sense. And we know about sexual selection, so that I guess that the peacock's tail is there and maybe has this brilliance that we all find beautiful because peahens thought that that was really irresistible. There is that component, but I do believe that the degree to which the pleasure that we take in beauty operates sort of sets us apart from other creatures in a way that I don't think it's true of all of things about value that we human beings have built into us, of the better and the worse, and the other animals have built into them about some things they experience as better and some things they experience as worse. But I think that we're kind of unique in our relationship to beauty, and I think that that corresponds with our needing a motivational source to do what's right. What's right meaning to do what's beautiful, to do what's well ordered, that we need to be motivated in the direction of how things should be. Because the more indeterminate human beings with their culture become, the more there's a possibility that we will make things the way they shouldn't be. And that problem only gets compounded when we step across the threshold out of our cultural, but still very continuous with our biologically evolved niche. Hunter-gatherers are basically living like primate bands. But then we step onto this thing where not only do we have a wider range of possibilities than we ever had before. I mean, hunting gathering bands could develop lots of different kinds of culture, but there were real limits within which they would operate. But once you break out of the natural order and you start inventing a way of life, whole cloth in terms of size and structure, means of subsistence and political organization and economic system, all that is just sort of like, wow, you can go almost any direction. And I don't think we've had time to evolve a whole lot more motivation in the direction of beauty, of choosing what is well ordered. But we have a much wider range. But not only that, but we have a social evolutionary process that we unwittingly unleashed, so that there's a lot of ugliness in the human world from the beginnings of civilization. A lot of war of all against all, a lot of trauma, a lot of people getting trampled, a lot of injustice, a lot of the spirit of the gangster. So a lot of ugliness that we see in human history and that we still see in the world around us. And our sense of beauty, whether it's been enhanced at all in the 10, 5, whatever you want to this problem has certainly been quite evident for 5,000 years. Maybe it's been quite evident for a lot longer, as we have been swept up in a social evolutionary process that continually operates where a destructive process of selection chooses among the cultural options and gives us a lot of bad answers to the question, how should human beings live? But there certainly has been a lot of room for people to yearn for what would be beautiful. I mean, consider a world in which people were acting all the time on a widespread basis according to do unto others as you would have others do unto you. I mean, just imagine all the things that are happening in the world around us and that happen throughout history with all of its invasions and conquests and annihilations and do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I mean, if we envision that kind of a world, we call it beautiful. And it really would be much more life-serving. It would mean that we would survive in greater, we would thrive, that people would feel fulfilled. All the emblems of goodness would be maximized if people operated according to some kind of beauty, even going beyond the golden rule. You could say, love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, what would the world look like if people behaved that way? It would be beautiful. In the Iliad, Achilles, the great warrior, who's about to lay waste to the Trojans as the world's greatest warrior, and to kill the Hector, the fine prince of Troy, and break his father's heart, the king Priam. Achilles, that guy, played by Brad Pitt in the recent movie, has carved into his shield a vision of a peaceful world of plenty and good feeling and goodwill. I can't remember how the Iliad describes that, but it's a vision of the world as it should be. I would say that when Isaiah talks about swords into plowshares, he's talking about a more beautiful world. There's beauty in certain kinds of visions. And I'm guessing that evolutionarily speaking, this pleasure that we take in beauty constitutes sort of a widespread motivation to order things well. I mean, that's precisely what the rise of civilization has made it way too challenging to do, because with civilization there emerges a destructive force that inevitably that would be hard for any species in our position to bring under control. But ordering things well is really what we need to do. We need to create a beautiful world, or we're going to destroy ourselves. I mean, if you look up on my website, abetterhumanstory.org, and look for a piece called "The Fate of Human Civilization," we got to make a beautiful civilization, or we'll destroy ourselves. And even though that wasn't exactly the problem that our ancestors faced while we were evolving into this kind of a cultural creature that needs a kick in the pants in the direction of good order, which is what I'm hypothesizing. That we need to harness that and to be aware of when we look at what's happening in Ukraine, to see the ugliness and to hanker for the beauty. Here's the Ukraine we want to have exist. Here's the ugliness that this war criminal in Moscow has inflicted on the world through his war crimes in Ukraine. This is one of the places within us that's been evolved that we can tap into to get the motivation we need to make a more beautiful world, because I think we've got a choice between, I usually express it in terms of order our civilization well enough and soon enough to enable our species to live as a civilized society on this planet for the long haul. But it could it could be put also in terms of, or a component of our motivational force that's available to us is to be tuned in on what's beautiful and what's ugly. Because we've got this pleasure that we take in beauty. It's a clue that it has led our ancestors to do things that are life-serving, or it wouldn't be there. So we ought to tune in on beauty and to reject ugliness. One of the things I'd like to do in an op-ed piece soon will be to describe Trump in a very direct human way, so that people will see the ugliness. I've said every time I talk about the op-eds I put out here in the conservative Shenandoah Valley, 70% Trumpish, I say I don't know whether my efforts have any impact. I just say I do what I can. And one of the things I'm going to do on the question of beauty and ugliness, I don't know if beauty is going to come into it. I'm going to characterize some things that we know about Trump. One of them's got to do with expressing in a tasteful way, it's suitable to a family newspaper, but evocative of this is who this guy is, what Trump did with his hand to E. Jean Carroll. A unanimous jury said, yeah, he did it. And what he did to Mike Pence, that can be described in terms of the guy who had debased himself to be such a sycophant to something which is so contrary to what he said he believes in. And then to treat this guy, willing to have the crowd, hang Mike Pence. That's really something. And then the third thing is what happened in the pandemic, how he put his own interest ahead of his responsibility to the American people, because he doesn't give a damn. It's just such an emblem of utter selfishness. Don't have to get into policy issues here. These are just human portraits of a human monster. So maybe I'll bring in at the end what Lindsey Graham said about Joe Biden. It's really kind of amazing that the way he's been demonized on the right. This guy that Lindsey Graham said, there's got to be something wrong with you because if you don't like him, because he's as fine a man as God created. So maybe I'll bring that in at the end. And there's a way of, there are ways of showing what's at stake in the present political battle, which at bottom is really rightly conceived as a battle between good and evil. There are other layers. There's democracy versus fascism. There's Biden versus Trump. There's all these layers, but they actually come down to good and evil. And I think the ugliness that Trump offers should be shown. And I'm going to show it in as visceral and as divorced from politics, This is how you treat this guy who sacrificed, who served you so nobly until he got to the point where his advisors like Judge Ludig and Dan Quayle were telling him he must obey the Constitution and not do what Trump asked. Imagine what kind of man that would be. Anyway, there's something to be put out there. I would love it if I could touch the chords that are in the good people in conservative America who are backing this guy to suddenly wake up and see, that this is not what they believe in. I don't know that there's any way of doing that, but I don't think we should be giving up on those people, the people who have married themselves to ugliness. They are people, if you talk with them in other areas, that do have a sense of what's beautiful. They do have a sense of the beauty of the natural world they live in the Shenandoah Valley. They care about that. And they have a sense of the beauty that they talk about in their churches. There's some of their churches anyway. Some of them have gone over to the dark side. About what a follower of Jesus would do in the world. And I think that we got to recapture all the goodness that somehow evil won over the last generation because propagandists were so effective and because the liberal America slept and didn't fight for the hearts and minds of these people who are in many ways good people, but have been put into some state of consciousness I don't understand. Not understanding it, I don't know whether what I'm going to say about this ugliness is going to have any impact. But I'll do what I can, because what else can we do? Thank you.